I was really excited when I became aware that World Maritime University was planning an academy in the Pacific, and I was very, very, very humbled to be invited to be an invited speaker, and very appreciative to the organising committee for the opportunity to participate. And particular thanks to World Maritime University, the Korea Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, and the Korea Maritime Institute for the arrangements and for making it possible for so many of you to all be here. Not least two of the staff within my team, Jeannie and Keelife, who I look forward to hearing updates from them of what they've learned. So many of you might know, and some of you I think are registered, the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission will hold its 21st regular annual session here in Suva, starting from Wednesday next week. So the timing for this is almost perfect. I'm here a few days earlier than the rest of the Secretariat team who arrive on the weekend in order to support that meeting, and all the papers are up, and we're into final preparation phase. So this presentation is giving you a little bit of a taster of some of the work that will, and negotiations that will be discussed starting next week, and hopefully with some very positive and productive outcomes towards combating IUU. When we think about the role of WCPFC, we sort of need to ground it in the international legal framework and the international legal context, in the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention, the UN Fish Stocks Agreement. The Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission was one of the first instruments that was adopted after the UN Fish Stocks Agreement. It's one of the regional arrangements that was adopted to be consistent with and to implement the UN Fish Stocks Agreement. There is a governing body which comprises all the member governments, all the Pacific Island countries, the United States, Korea, Japan, China. We have Taiwan at the table, European Union, France, and some of the and many other Asian countries in the region. And the role of WCPFC is to conserve and manage highly migratory fish stocks in the Western Central Pacific. So it's got a really big job. One of the major things that will happen next week at the meeting is there will be decisions and conservation and management measures that are agreed. And so those are agreed as a multilateral agreement, and those are the decisions and the frameworks that provide the basis for work and implementation to happen. And they provide the basis for the Commission's MCS framework and its monitoring control surveillance tools. So there's sort of three levels, and it's important to, when you're thinking about MCS and combating IUU, to think about that international legal framework, just because it is an intergovernmental arrangement, and so it's important that we reflect on that. The Western Central Pacific as an organisation has been around since 2004, and so this is year 20, we're into year 20. The convention was signed in 2000, but it entered into force in 2004. It's headquartered in Ponape, and this is our offices here, which was kindly provided by our host, the Federated States of Micronesia, and it's a beautiful office to work in, and it serves us very well. The current chair of the Western Central Pacific Commission is Dr. Josie Tamate from Niue, and the executive director is Ms. Maria Moss-Christian from Marshall Islands. The Secretariat hosts a total of 30 staff. There's 3 fewer at the Secretariat offices today because we're here, and I've got 8 other colleagues who are internationally recruited. So this is where FSM is for those of you who haven't travelled up in the north, and that's where we are in Suva. So the red lines are the convention area. So everything to the left of this line is waters covered by the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission and by the meeting that will be happening next week. There isn't a defined boundary in this area, but it's largely understood to sort of reach the boundaries of some Pacific Island, some Asian countries in the region. But we do understand from the negotiations that the South China Sea is not part of those arrangements. So when we talk about the Commission has a number of identities. It's got its Secretariat, which is where I work. It's also got its governing body, which are the member governments of the Commission, and many of you who are here are often sitting at the table in that head seat as part of the governing body. So there are 26 members, and there are a number of participating territories, and there are special arrangements to allow for some of the South American countries and others who provide fishing vessels to cooperate with the Commission, and currently there are 7 of those. When we talk about a member government's role, it can be multifaceted. It can be as a coastal country who's interested in looking to develop their fisheries. It can also be as a flag state who is looking to and does have vessels that they're responsible for both within their waters but also outside. There are also roles as market states and processing states, and so it can be quite complex, some of the international negotiations and understanding the different roles, and then thinking about it in the context of the international geopolitical realm. Catches from WCPFC are significant. It is over 50% of global tuna supply that comes from the Western Central Pacific. It's not just important to the world, it's also particularly important to the Pacific and to the Southeast Asian region because of the value of the fishery, which has increased considerably, but also because of the opportunities that it provides for countries to be able to anchor their development aspirations to the fisheries and to use it to support their economies. Fortunately, the tuna fisheries, and we have SPC as the scientific advisory body who gives us very good science and takes all the data into account, and what they're telling us is that the skipjack, yellowfin, big eye and albacore fisheries are in the green. We have sustainable fisheries that are being well managed at the moment. And so that provides an opportunity to focus on how we get the management framework tightened up so that we can keep it that way. The Commission meets annually, and every year there are new conservation and management measures that are agreed, and so at the moment we have something like 43 conservation and management measures. There could be up to 8 or 9 which will be revised at next week's meeting, and potentially another 3 or 4 that will be agreed in December at the meeting next week. And so part of my job and part of the job of Jeannie and Keelaf, who are here, is helping to support the Commission's review of the implementation of those measures by members. The Commission's been around a while, and it also has had the benefit of building on existing regional arrangements. Regional arrangements for data collection that SPC and Pacific Island countries have partnered with to support over many years, and regional arrangements that have been supported by the Foreign Fisheries Agency in terms of monitoring, control and surveillance, but also minimum terms and conditions for licensing. And so when the Commission started in 2004, it wasn't starting from a point of zero. It was starting from a very good foundation of sub-regional and regional cooperation and partnerships with fishing countries, which has meant that we've then built the Commission's framework to sit alongside and to complement rather than to duplicate And so we've got a good suite of tools that are there. And with the time, I will just touch on them briefly, and I know that Jeannie's already covered the first one of these in the presentations last week, which is the record of fishing vessels. And this is one of the critical pieces of our monitoring, control and surveillance picture. Any vessels that are authorised to be fishing in the area, they need to be on this register. Markets look to this public register to make sure that the fish that's coming into their ports, into their markets, is caught by a vessel that is authorised, and members themselves have to look to this and are expected to ensure it. So currently there are just over or nearly 3,100 vessels, and this is our positive list of authorised fishing vessels in the region, and so this is one of the bits of work that is a cornerstone of our MCS framework. We also have a vessel monitoring system, and we're very grateful for the continued support that FFA provides to WCPFC for VMS services. So we have a system that is associated with but managed separately from the Foreign Fisheries Agency system, and we pay FFA an annual fee to use the architecture so that we can have a seamless transfer of data between the system where that's permitted under the rules. But what it means is that, at least in the high seas and in most exclusive economic zones within the convention area, there is a requirement and an expectation and monitoring that ensures that vessels are authorised by their flag state and are being tracked by the flag state, but also by the Commission and by coastal countries. And so that gives visibility and a bit of confidence that if you're authorised, you're being tracked, then you're probably going to be complying with the rules, and if you're not, you're most likely going to be found. And Yoni will be talking a bit about some of the activities that FFA supports, which puts the checks and balances to ensure that we have all the vessels on VMS that we should. We also have, and this is we as in we, all of the Commission and its members, have a regional observer program. The role of the secretariats to administer and facilitate the arrangements for the observer program, but it's actually the countries around the region and sub-regional agencies who supply the observers. So the role of the secretariats to audit and check that each of the observer programs is continuing to meet minimum standards, and it's the observer programs at a national level and a sub-regional level who supply observers to independently collect data on fishing activities that are out there. We've got very good coverage on purse seine vessels with 100% requirement, and there's increasing efforts to push the 5% observer coverage on longline vessels to something that is a little bit more comparable to what we have with purse seining, and technologies such as electronic monitoring are also being considered and being progressed as a way of independently checking that the catch and effort reporting is what it should be and as expected. We've also got observers on carrier vessels to observe high seas transshipments. There's continuing work to make sure that the data flows for that high seas transshipment observing is taking place, and that the Commission can start to properly utilise that data to check and provide reporting on how well we're doing with high seas transshipment at the moment. I'm not going to talk too much on this because Kilaf, my colleague, is going to spend a little bit more time on this later in the day. But the High Seas Boarding and Inspection Scheme is a really important MCS tool. It's a way that patrol boats and Coast Guard vessels can be authorised by WCPFC to go and board and inspect in the high seas. And that's an implementation of the UN Fish Stocks Agreement articles. And we've got a very long history of experience and positive lessons that have come from the WCPFC's High Seas Boarding and Inspection Scheme, and a lot of really good data that we can actually start to contribute to considering whether conservation and management measures are working. There's quite a long history of experience and a good coverage across the years by these activities, and we're very grateful for the support of all the 14 member governments who have opted in to be part of this scheme and continue to contribute to policing the high seas through the High Seas Boarding and Inspection Scheme. We have rules for high seas transshipment activities that ensure that there is some reporting that is received by the Secretariat that can allow for us to put figures like there have been 902 reported high seas transshipments that occurred in 2023. The amount of catch that's transshipped is quite significant. It's 15 to 30% depending on the species and the year and how sure we are about the reporting of those activities. There is work that's underway at the moment and will be discussed and potentially finalised next week to try and strengthen and ensure there is greater monitoring of high seas transshipment activities, and we remain really hopeful that those negotiations can be concluded and they can actually contribute to giving us a better sense of certainty about the monitoring activities that are out there. But it's an area to watch, and I know many of you have been engaged quite actively in those discussions and will have as strong views on this as I do about the import of getting a good handle on these activities. There's just too much, and it's too significant to not be able to tighten that up. We also have a number of other tools, much like other regional fisheries management organisations. There's a blacklist which currently has 4 vessels on it. It's not well used, but it is still a very good deterrent. If you're on a IUU list of a regional fisheries management organisation like WCPFC, that vessel can't go into port, it can't offload catch into a country that recognises WCPFC. It becomes very difficult to operate, and increasingly it becomes difficult for the companies associated with that vessel to operate. So it's a very good deterrent. We have a Port State Measures Minimum Standards measure. Fiji has put up their hand this year to lead a review of this measure, and that just recognises that there are so many members of WCPFC who are now signatories to the Port State Measures Agreement, and there's an opportunity to really look at ways that the WCPFC process can better support members with their implementation of the FAO Port State Measures Agreement, and considering what role we as an RFMO can serve in that regard. And so those were things that were left until we were at this point of the negotiations, and so it's time. The other thing which is really powerful, and this links again to Yoni's presentation, we have quite forward-looking rules in WCPFC that have meant data isn't just locked up, it's actually made available to support MCS activities, including in the high seas. So we regularly, as part of the work that my team does, receive data requests and process them and review them to check that they are in accordance with the rules. And if they are, we can make VMS data, we can make high seas transshipment data, we can make observer reports available for investigations or to support high seas boarding and inspection or aerial surveillance or just desktop MCS activities. And so FFA is making really good use of this, as are many of the countries who are active high seas boarding and inspection parties. And so that's a really powerful tool because there isn't much point, all the data coming in, the Secretariat itself doesn't have enforcement powers, so the way that we can send it and make it available to members under certain rules that everybody has already agreed means that the members who have the enforcement powers, such as what Ms. Kim had provided in her presentation, it means that countries who have the assets and the ability and the interest in supporting the Commission's work can actually go out onto the water and assist us with getting a handle on activities in the high seas. So that's a really important tool that we do our best to support as much as we can within the Secretariat, and are continuing to look at ways that we can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our support for that work. And lastly, as I think you already know, you would have heard yesterday that there is work underway in WCPFC to adopt a binding conservation and management measure on minimum standards, labour standards for crew on fishing vessels, and it's really looking after the people who are out there supporting the fishing activities. It's a good social responsibility and hopefully a really nice story that will come from next week's meeting is the adoption of that conservation and management measure and a plan to get that implemented. There's a whole range of other measures, and I've just put this slide in just for completeness to give you a sense that the Commission is not just MCS, even though that's the focus a lot of what I do in my work, but there's also a lot of work that's done to put in place a conservation and management measure framework for the target tunas and the target fishing activities. And there's a lot of work that's underway and has been done over many years to ensure that the environmental impact of the fishing activities, that we're getting information and data that can support scientific analysis and review, and it can also ensure that we're putting in place controls that ensure that the fisheries are not causing too much harm to non-target and dependent associated species or the marine environment generally. And so that's another positive, I think, that demonstrates the commitment of Commission members to the Pacific and ensuring that it continues to stay blue and productive for a long time. And there's a range of data requirements that underpin those, which ensure that the Science Committee can review the information and provide advice to make good decisions. So that is my presentation, Professor Hahn, and I would very much welcome any questions that people might have about WCPFC and look forward to the discussions over the next few days that I'm able to participate in while I'm here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lara. But before you go, we have a few minutes, so if you have some more questions or comments. Professor Lafayette.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation and all the elements that you input inside it. It was really interesting. Thank you very much for that. I have a question on the last one of the last slides about the improvement of labor standards. I would like to know a little bit more about what is inside. Is it a copy and paste of the C188, or is it something that is going to complement C188, or something that will promote C188? What is the relationship with the ILO Work in Fisheries Convention, Work in Fishing Convention?
I will admit that I'm not an expert in 188, but I have been supporting the co-chairs from New Zealand and Indonesia who have been leading the negotiation and developing the draft text. The ILO has been an advisor to that process, and it's my understanding that a lot of what is in that measure is intended to complement and be consistent with the ILO standards and requirements. The focus of the measure initially, so we have a non-binding resolution already that was adopted in 2018. So that sets in place some general principles about the importance of this. Then there was a process to actually work towards the negotiation of a binding measure. I think we will be one of the first regional fisheries management organisations in the world to do it. What we used as a basis was the protection of observers measure, which was hard-fought and negotiated to ensure that there were protections and safety standards for observers. And so it's sort of from that as a starting point, then looking to ensure consistency with international labour standards as well as national labour standards that the draft measure on labour has sort of sought to progress. Because of the complexity of the negotiations, it's taken a bit of time. A lot of the people who sit at the table from Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Fisheries, and they don't necessarily have mandates for issues like labour. And so for some countries, be they big ones or some of the smaller countries, they've really had to go home and really have good discussions at a national level about the extent to which a fisheries arrangement can actually be the basis for adopting these standards and how they would then go about implementing them. And so it's been quite an interesting series of negotiations, but we've got a really good text, which I think, and it's, once all the final little negotiating bits are ironed out, it should actually put in place a nice framework for protecting and ensuring the safety of crew who are out there, and providing greater information about unfortunate incidents that may occur, be someone injured out at sea or somebody that unfortunately might die while doing their fishing activity work. So yeah, those are my comments. I know that people like Francisco have also been actively involved in it, and he might have some thoughts that he wants to share on that specific topic, and I'd welcome those.
Thank you for throwing me to the deep end. Yeah, we talked a little bit about this. So it does build on a resolution which is not binding, who was the first one worldwide on this aspect, and if it goes through next week, it will be the first one in the world where a fisheries body relates to labour. It builds also on the harmonized terms and conditions of FFA, which, as discussed today, is the first one that links the right to fish to compliance with minimal terms and in terms of contracting, at least. Of course, as anything that goes into the consensus, which is the structure of the Commission. After 4 years, it's a bit of a homeopathy version of the original, but you have two options. And I think everyone agrees that, yeah, of course, it's not what we wanted as the top, but don't let the perfect get on the way of the good. And all the CMMs do go to, at some stage, to a process of review. So you have a foot on the door, and then things will get better. Other than transshipments, which still another problem, but that's another problem. Anyway, so yeah, but yeah, I think it's again, everyone that works here or worked in this will agree that it's still short of what we intended, but it's a foot on the door, and that is, to my understanding, pretty much monumental, because now other RFMOs are starting to talk about this. So we have been talking for 4 years, so hopefully something comes through next week. I can send you the draft.
Okay, quite impressive. And any other question or comment? Mr. Yun.
Thank you very much. Fantastic presentation. Lara, I just wanted to use the opportunity, if you could just elaborate more on the process. Well, it's a great MCS tool, and then reflecting on the theme for today is enforcement. Before we get to the IU listing, if you could just talk a little bit more on the investigation reporting process under Article 25 for the sake of our members here. Thank you.
Sure, Yoni. Yeah, I touched on, I didn't go into that one in much detail. So under the WCPFC's convention, there is a provision that allows for one country to request an investigation of another country of the activities of their vessels or of the activities of their nationals. And so where it relates to the activities of a fishing vessel, it falls as an Article 25(2), which is just the number of the article within the convention, and then there's a different paragraph for looking after investigations related to nationals, but essentially it's the same thing. And so what it means is that a country that's out doing high seas boarding and inspection activities, or a country that's doing aerial surveillance, or an organisation like FFA that's working with Pacific Island countries, can put together a case package and pass it to the flag state, and we've got contacts for that, and ask that they provide an investigation. And so one of the tools that we've looked to put in place at WCPFC, and it's been working, I think, pretty well, is an online compliance case file system. So we can actually track each and every one of those requests for investigation. They could be small questions, they could be quite persistent and really not good and quite illegal activities, or they could be an observer has been harmed. It ranges. We're able to classify and link all the potential infringements through this case tracking system. And then there is an online process on each case and on each alleged infringement for those the responses from the flag state and the notifying state, or if there's a coastal state who's got an interest, to be able to be heard and to be exchanged through this online system. And so one of the things that my team's responsible for is actually including the outcomes of those reports, not in detail, but at a high summary level, to sort of show what is this information telling us about whether or not the conservation and management measures for protecting turtles are working? What does this tell us about whether or not coastal state laws are being respected? What does this tell us about whether the VMS measure is working? So that's essentially what we have as a mechanism and a process, as well as a tool and a system to support it. But I think it has helped to surface and provide assurance to all Commission members that there is a transparent process, at least amongst ourselves, that respects data security and confidentiality and privacy laws. And so there's still a little bit of work to be done in terms of thinking how best to use that for the compliance process, but we've been able to incorporate it into our learning and our thinking and our reporting to date.